Welcome to Love Your Life After Divorce, the podcast where you'll learn everything you need to know to rebuild your life after divorce from the inside out. Let's dive in. Hey there, welcome to another episode of the podcast. Today we're going to talk about forgiveness and whether or not forgiveness is really important or not. We're going to talk about forgiving your ex and forgiving yourself. Why do you need to, or do you actually need to? And how can you do it if it feels really hard to you? Forgiveness after divorce can definitely feel a bit complicated, and I've heard lots of varying opinions on it. But I truly believe that it's a key part of healing and moving forward. So, first, let's dive into what forgiveness actually means and explore how it can set you free. So, I want to start with a really clear definition because I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there about what forgiveness actually is. So, the dictionary defines forgiveness as to stop feeling angry or resentful towards someone for an offense, flaw, or mistake. Now, I love this definition because it focuses on your feelings. And I think this is crucial for understanding why forgiveness is actually important. Forgiveness is not about letting your ex off the hook. You don't forgive him because he deserves it or to make him feel better. Forgiveness is really about releasing the emotional weight that you're carrying. For example, one of my clients couldn't stop replaying the moment that her ex told her he was leaving and that he no longer loved her. She kept thinking things like, how could he betray me like this? I trusted him. These thoughts fueled her anger, and she believed that by staying mad, she was somehow holding him accountable. But in reality, her ex had moved on, and she was the one stuck in pain. And so when she started to understand that the forgiveness wasn't for him and that it was actually for her, she began to let go of those thoughts and she experienced a lot of relief. And so forgiving your ex doesn't mean you're giving him the message or that you're saying to yourself that his words or actions weren't wrong. Forgiveness doesn't mean you're saying that what he did was totally fine or that you weren't really hurt by him. Deciding to forgive him doesn't mean you're condoning his actions. Another common misconception is that forgiving your ex means you have to pretend to forget what they did or that you have to invite them back into your life and be friendly. This is not the case. Forgiveness does not mean that you eliminate boundaries. There's another woman that I'm currently working with who has an ex with narcissistic characteristics. He turns things back on her, takes her words out of context, blames her for things, and doesn't take responsibility for himself. Now, for years and years throughout their marriage, she tolerated this behavior. She covered up for his mistakes in front of family and friends. And now she's finally out of the relationship after realizing that she deserves to be treated much better. But she still has to co-parent with him because they have young kids. And she was afraid that forgiving him meant she had to be okay with his behavior or that she had to be friends with him. But that's not true. Forgiveness just allowed her to release her anger toward him. But she also now gets to set clear boundaries. Now, this client does an amazing job of thinking about what's best for her kids. And so she's really doing what she can to foster the relationship between her ex and her kids. And so she's invited him over for dinner once a week when she has the kids. But she's also very careful in her communication with him. She is learning to ignore his snide remarks and not take the bait when he tries to goad her into an argument. She keeps their conversations focused on the kids and the logistics of taking care of them. And so forgiveness frees you from emotional stress, and boundaries protect your peace and keep you safe. So, forgiving your ex does not cancel out boundaries. They are two separate things, and you can absolutely have both. So, like I've been saying, forgiveness is for you. The main reason to forgive is for your own peace of mind and healing. When you hold on to anger, resentment, or bitterness, it's like carrying around a big, heavy backpack that just drains your energy. And your ex may not even notice the weight you're carrying. Your anger and resentment, feelings, your unforgiveness won't affect him at all. In fact, depending on what kind of person he is, it might give him satisfaction to know that he's still causing you pain or that you're still spending emotional energy on him. So, carrying around those heavy emotions of unforgiveness are not punishing him or hurting him at all. They're just weighing you down and keeping you stuck. Now, this is a story that I hear quite often. A woman gets divorced because her ex cheated, and she thinks he doesn't deserve my forgiveness after what he did. But as the months pass, she notices that her anger is consuming her, making it hard for her to enjoy her life or definitely to trust anyone new. Meanwhile, her ex has moved on, but she's still stuck, dwelling on the past. Forgiveness will allow her to stop thinking about him and start focusing on her own happiness and the future she wants to create. So, forgiveness allows you to break free from the emotional chains that tie you to your ex and to your past. It's not about excusing bad behavior, but it's about choosing peace over continued emotional pain. So, now let's talk about forgiving yourself. You may be in a position where you aren't really struggling to forgive your ex for anything, but you're struggling to forgive yourself. And forgiving yourself can actually be just as, if not more challenging than forgiving your ex. When you have trouble forgiving your ex, you're carrying around all those heavy, painful emotions. But when you're struggling to forgive yourself, not only are you feeling those same emotions, but you're also attacking yourself. You're directing that negative energy toward yourself. The judgment and guilt you place on yourself can keep you stuck in a cycle of self blame. You're basically punishing yourself. Now, I can speak from experience because I really struggled with this. After I had an affair at the very end of my marriage, I did everything I could to make it right. And I'm saying make it right in quotes because obviously you can't make something like that right. But what I mean is, I confessed, I apologized to everyone involved, I took accountability for my actions, I learned from my mistake. But even after a few years had passed, I still couldn't fully forgive myself. I kept thinking, how could I have done this? I was the quote, good girl who always made the right choices. And so I realized what I was doing is I felt like I deserved punishment. So I was heaping judgment and guilt on myself as a way to make myself pay for my mistake. So it was basically penance. And what really helped me forgive myself was fully embracing the fact that I am not perfect. Now, I know that may sound silly because obviously I know on an intellectual level that I'm not perfect and that I wasn't perfect, but I was living in this space of disbelief that I had done something so wrong. I was unable to accept the reality of my choices and behavior. And so when I finally gave myself permission to be an imperfect person who had made a bad choice, I was able to extend compassion and forgiveness to myself and just move on. Another thing I've heard women who struggle with guilt say is, I should have tried harder. They realize that maybe they didn't communicate as effectively or speak up about their needs or dissatisfaction with the relationship. Maybe they didn't go to counseling and now they're wishing they would have. They look back at the marriage dynamic and they see how they could have shown up differently. But that constant second guessing and self blame only makes people feel worse. And the undeniable truth is that you cannot change the past. Realize that you were doing the best you could at the time with who you were at the time. Learn from your mistakes and decide what you'll do differently in the future, and then move forward and stop dwelling on the past. When we refuse to forgive ourselves, we stay stuck in guilt and shame, and there's no positive result for doing this. But accepting that we are imperfect humans who sometimes make bad choices is critical to moving forward. Self forgiveness is about releasing the past and giving yourself permission to be imperfect. So, we've talked about what forgiveness is and why it's important. And so, the next question is, how do you actually forgive? And first, I want to point out that you don't need an apology in order to forgive someone. You can choose to let go of anger and resentment towards someone, even if they never acknowledge that they hurt you, even if they never take 1 ounce of responsibility. I had a horribly toxic, emotionally abusive relationship during and after my divorce. When I finally woke up and came out of the fog I was in and realized the truth of the situation, I confronted him. I begged, I cried for him to just admit what he had done so I could get some closure and move on. I knew he had lied to me, but I didn't know the full extent and I didn't understand exactly why. But he wouldn't. He never would come clean and own up to all the lies he told, how cruelly he manipulated me and used me. It drove me absolutely crazy for a few months. I just couldn't comprehend how someone could be so cold, selfish, and uncaring. I hated him so much that I wished really bad things would happen to him. And I hate to admit that because normally I'm a very kind and compassionate person, but he hurt me in a way I had never been hurt, and I wanted him to suffer. Now, eventually, I realized that the rage and the hatred I felt for him wasn't serving any purpose. It definitely wasn't negatively affecting him, and it left me feeling awful. And so I decided to set aside my painful feelings for my own sake. I didn't want him to take up one more ounce of my emotions or my brain space. And one day, something magical happened, and I forgot that he existed. Now, I'm referring to a Taylor Swift song, by the way. I don't know if you know it, but it's called I Forgot That You Existed. And it has such amazing lyrics about what it's like when you've been obsessing over someone, and then one day you just realize you haven't thought about them at all and you forgot that they existed. And I love that song, but ironically, it always makes me think of the man that I actually wish I could forget that he existed. But back to how to forgive. So the process begins by changing your thoughts about the situation. Since our emotions come from our thoughts, altering the way we think can transform how we feel. For example, if you are having thoughts about your ex that are full of bitterness, things like, he's a liar, he never loved me, or toward yourself, how could I have been so stupid? These thoughts fuel your hurt and they prevent you from healing. Now, when you start working through these thoughts, you realize that holding on to them is only hurting you. You can begin practicing new thoughts, like he wasn't capable of giving me the love I needed, or his actions reflect who he is and have nothing to do with my worth or my lovability. Now, this shift won't happen overnight, but with time, you will feel this growing sense of peace as you replace your old thoughts with your new ones. And the best way, I think, to identify the thoughts that you're thinking is to journal. Just write down all the thoughts you have about your ex, for example. If you're having a hard time forgiving him, just start writing everything you think about him. And it's going to reveal that the thoughts you're thinking that are keeping you stuck and that are not allowing you to forgive and move on. And so then you can take those thoughts one by one and you can start challenging them and reframing them. Here are some other new thoughts that you might consider. My ex couldn't love me the way I needed, and that's about him, not me. His actions are a reflection of his character, not mine. I choose to let go of resentment because it's hurting me, not him. Another one of my clients struggled to forgive her ex for abandoning their family. And through journaling, she realized that her deepest thought was, I can't believe he would do this to us. But she decided to reframe it to he was thinking of himself, not us. And that's his failure, not ours. So this new perspective really helped her release the anger that had been weighing her down. Now, I also want to point out the fact that forgiveness is always a choice, and no one should pressure you into it before you're ready. Sometimes you may have well meaning friends or family that might push you to forgive because maybe they're uncomfortable with the situation. But this can feel manipulative or invalidating. You have the right to take the time you need to process your feelings. Forgiveness is a process, it doesn't happen overnight. And before you can forgive, you have to process all of your painful feelings that you're having, your grief, your anger, your sadness. If you try to rush past those too quickly and just move on to forgiveness, it's not going to be genuine and you're not going to feel the relief that you need to feel. And so take your time. Like I've said so many times before on this podcast, you have to feel those emotions in order to heal. And so forgiveness does not mean skipping over those emotions. It means working through them so that you can eventually let go of the pain. So, forgiveness, whether for your ex or for yourself, is a critical step in healing after divorce. Now, again, I want to reiterate it does not mean excusing bad behavior or forgetting the pain or not having boundaries, but it means choosing to release the emotional burdens that are holding you back. If you're holding on to resentment, you're keeping yourself anchored to the past and emotionally tied to your ex, and that makes it hard to move forward. So just remember that forgiveness is a process. Give yourself time, be patient, and remember that you're choosing to forgive for you and not for anyone else. So maybe now is the time for you to give yourself the gift of forgiveness. If you're feeling lost, overwhelmed, or unsure of how to move forward after your divorce, I've created a free guide just for you. It's called the 5 Stages of Divorce Recovery, and it lays out the roadmap to help you heal, rebuild, and love your life after divorce. This guide is packed with insights and actionable steps that will take you from grieving to embracing your future with confidence. Click the link in this podcast description, and the free guide will be delivered straight to your inbox.